Another day and another thrilling Memphis Grizzlies win. That's four in a row. Four wins for the Memphis Grizzlies in a row. And guess what? This one was different because Marcus Smart made his return. So we got to talk about that because he made a real big impact in this game. And we got to talk about who else could potentially be returning soon to the Memphis Grizzlies. It doesn't end right here. Let's talk about it. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? What's going on, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Damichael Cole, beat writer for Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee, the most beautiful land in the world. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies each and every day. This is my first time being back with you in a while. I know Joe Molinax through the holiday season last week as I was traveling all over the place, in Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Atlanta, Houston, etc. Joe Molinax did a good job of holding it down here on Locked On Grizzlies with you guys. And now we flipped the roles a little bit. Joe is getting to spend a little bit of time with his family, in the holiday season. And I'm here with you guys to keep you updated on what's been going on around the team and the latest with the Memphis Grizzlies. But before we get into all that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Here's the thing about Gametime. Go download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA in all caps, LOCKEDON NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. So make sure you take advantage of that. Speaking of taking advantage, the Grizzlies have done a good job in the last four games of taking advantage of the opportunities with better players, with healthy players returning and making an impact on this team. This team looks like a completely different team. I haven't talked about it much with you guys as of late again because I haven't been on here. And I want to add this as well. When I was in New Orleans, when I was in Atlanta, when I was in not much in Oklahoma, I don't think, but New Orleans and Atlanta specifically, Grizzlies fans, you're traveling very well. Even came up to me and said, "Hey, DeMichael, I listen to Locked On Grizzlies. I like the show. Really appreciate you guys. That means a lot to me. That means a lot to Joe. As always, make sure you guys continue to like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Let me know what we can and can't do to improve the show, and we'll make sure we make that happen. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the Locked On visitors, Locked On viewers who showed love to us while I was on the road during the road trip. But with all that being said, things are finally starting to turn in the Grizzlies' favor, and now that's four consecutive wins. That's Ja Morant making a big impact on this team, and things are starting to fall in place. And the latest piece to the puzzle that is falling in place for the Grizzlies is the return of Marcus Smart. Now, here's the thing. I think this game played out perfectly how it was supposed to play out for Marcus Smart because it kind of, it was a different kind of cinematic feeling. When Ja Morant returned, you had the buzzer beater, you had the Grizzlies getting the win in New Orleans and all that. This had a different cinematic feeling. Marcus struggled early in the game. We're talking 3 shots through the first 3 quarters, 0 points, no assists. Like, he was just floating out there. Defensively, he was very active. Don't get me wrong. I think he had 2 or 3 steals through 3 quarters. He was active defensively, but outside of that, offensively, he was just there. But when you look at the final stat sheet, when you turn the game on at the end, you see 13 points. You see 5 steals. You see 2 big made 3-pointers. You see the steal that turned into the layup and the M1 opportunity at overtime. And then you see the charge that he took late in the game. The Grizzlies up for 45 seconds to go in overtime. He steps in front of the 280-pound Zion Williams and takes the charge. And that is just Marcus Smart to a T. This game was, to me, the game where we finally got a look at what type of impact that Marcus Smart could have on the Grizzlies' consistency. Some people may say, oh, that might be a one-game anomaly. We got 11 games where, Marcus Smart didn't look overly impressive through that stretch. But here's what I kept saying, and here's what Joe Mullinax kind of alluded to as well. Now that you have Ja Morant back, now that you gotta have Desmond Bane, and there's mixed opinions on Desmond Bane playing on the ball and whatnot, but I think now that you have Desmond Bane, who's grown into this role. I mean, he had 7 assists. He and Bane and Ja both had 7 assists each in this game. So now that you have these two guards who kind of grown into these primary playmaking roles, as well as getting their own baskets, it allows Marcus Smart to, play in a secondary facilitating role. And in that secondary facilitating role, what you see from Marcus Smart simply is, he'll play off the ball a little bit more. And he makes those kick out passes to Desmond Bane. We saw, I think it was late in the fourth quarter when Desmond Bane, the Grizzlies was down 4 in the final minute. Desmond Bane makes the 3-pointer, 33 seconds left, 1-point game, and the Grizzlies get one more free throw and to take it to overtime. Marcus Smart is kind of the perfect plug and play guy alongside of those guys. One reason why I've talked about this is you look at Marcus Smart's 3-point shoot numbers for the season, they don't really stand out. They're really not that good. They're league average, a little bit below average. His numbers have not stood out as a 3-point shooter. But go a step further. Look a little bit deeper into those stats. And what you'll see is a guy who entering yesterday's game, 36.6% 3-point shooting on catch and shoot opportunities. Why is that important? Because now that you have Ja Morant, now that you have Desmond Bane on the floor, most of Marcus Smart's 3-point shots, as we saw in this game against the Pelicans, are going to be of the spot-up variety. And even in this game, he didn't shoot it well, 2 of 8 on 3-pointers, but when he made them, And it was the fourth quarter. The Grizzlies were down 14, I think, and he made 2 3-pointers. I think it made it an 8-point game, 6-point game during that stretch. So Marcus Smart is going to make a big impact for this team. Defensively, what's understood doesn't have to be explained. I know there was a lot of talk about Vince Williams and what he does defensively and not wanting to really take him out of the starting lineup to some people. And here's my thoughts on that. Marcus Smart gives you similar things, and we saw it late in the game, right? You remember when he took that charge against Zion Williamson, you know who he was guarding on that possession? Marcus Smart was matched up with Brandon Ingram, and he slid his feet right in front of that circle as Brandon Ingram tried to cut through and go to the corner. He stayed there. He stayed home, took the charge against Zion Williamson, and it's just those type of plays that you get from Marcus Smart. 5 steals. And off the top of my head, I know 2 steals led to points automatically. One was a Desmond Bane transition layup, and the other one was the 3-point play for Marcus Smart. So 5 steals, 5 of the Grizzlies' 10 steals. The Grizzlies had 17 blocks as well. So we're talking 10 steals, 17 blocks, 27 stocks. I mean, defensively, this was one of, from an activity standpoint, this was one of the Grizzlies' best games of the season. And Marcus Smart's hands are all over. You may say, well, Damichael, how do you know that? Well, it's simple. Because look at this. Marcus Smart took that charge against Zion Williamson. I keep pointing out that play because if you've been following the Grizzlies under Taylor Jenkins, the Grizzlies have never, not under Taylor Jenkins, they've never been a team that's taken a lot of charges. If you don't believe me, go look at the numbers. The last 4 seasons, the Grizzlies have been no better than 23rd in the NBA in charges taken. I think they finished 23rd one season. They finished 30th one year, 29th, and 24th another year. Basically, they've never been in the top 20 in charges drawn per game. Now you look at this season so far. At this point of the season, the Grizzlies are in the top 8 in the NBA in charges drawn per game. But it's not just that, because here's where I talk about the Marcus Smart impact. And this is where it goes beyond just what he's doing on the court. The Grizzlies, even while he was out, showed the signs of being a better team at taking charge. So it's not just Marcus Smart himself, being like, a Jalen Williams or the Thunder or Kyle Lowry when he played with the Raptors and just being that one guy who's taking a lot of charges. That's not what it is. It's the team effort. In this game against the Pelicans alone, we saw Ja Morant jump in front of Jonas Valanciunas. It was called a block, but he thought he was there, and Ja Morant tried to take a charge against 265, 270-pound Valanciunas. We saw Desmond Bane jump in front of Zion Williamson to try to take a charge as well. That's your star backcourt. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and they're not just jumping in front of Herb Jones, Trey Murphy. We're talking two guys that are 260, 270 pounds plus coming full speed downhill at you. And the Grizzlies star players are putting their body on the line. As Marcus Smart said in his post-game interview, when you put your body on the line for your teammates, they're going to want to do the same for you. I can't help but think that's the Marcus Smart impact rubbing off on the Grizzlies. So you're seeing the Grizzlies kind of lay their bodies on the line a little bit more, taking charges. We saw the activity from the steals and the blocks. Just having Marcus Smart out there gives you another great defensive option. We saw when Marcus Smart went out of the game, the Grizzlies had the ability to bring in a guy like Vince Williams. And that changes things. Now you got guys who can put defensive pressure on opponents consistently. You got playmakers. I think Vince Williams had 3 blocks in this game. Shout out to Xavier Tillman as well. I think he had 5 blocks and 1 steal. We know what Jaren Jackson Jr. does. Basically, the defense is coming together. And now the next step is Taylor Jenkins has to mix and match these pairs. The Marcus Smart impact is there. I think the Grizzlies now with Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Ja Morant in this starting lineup, we'll see how the center spot continues to be figured out. But with those 4 guys, they can compete with anybody. They can compete with anybody. Can they beat certain teams more times than not? Probably not right now until they address the center position. But they can compete on any given day. You don't go into a game thinking with those 4 guys in the starting lineup that, the Grizzlies have no chance today. There's no way you go into a game thinking that. So things are starting to shift in Memphis. Marcus Smart's return, Ja Morant's return, the defensive identity is taking place. Marcus Smart, big shot maker, big shot taker, made some good passes down the stretch. I think the Grizzlies right now is currently constructed. They're built to make a run. We'll see how far and what's to come of that run. But the next step for me is figuring out these lineup combinations, not just the starters, but how the pairings will work throughout the game. We got to talk about that in a second. But before we get to that, I got to talk to you about our friends over at eBay Motors. So here's the thing about eBay Motors. It builds your vision part by part. And look, I always say, when I think about eBay Motors, I think about the fact that they teamed up with our Locked On Fantasy Basketball host, Josh Lloyd, to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long, whether you're prepping for a daily draft or you're scouting the waiver wire. Every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. And quite frankly, it's every week we got a player for you. So you might be saying, well, Damichael, who do you got for us this week? This one was easy to me. There's actually a guy that we've talked about, Isaiah Hartenstein. You remember earlier in the season, we were talking about the Grizzlies addressing center position. Well, Isaiah Hartenstein's probably not going to be available no more. That's because Mitchell Robinson is likely out for the season for the New York Knicks, according to multiple reports out there. And with that being the case, Isaiah Hartenstein is available out there on the waiver wire in some of your leagues, and you go pick him up. You're going to get a guy who's consistently getting double-digit rebounds. Every now and then he gets in double figures in points, and he is a good pick up at this point. Simply put, Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect pick, perfect fit. And guess what? If you talk about this, it's the same way with your cars. It's the same way with your vehicles as well. I always talked about, for me, everyone knows in college, my first car, my Honda Accord, I needed to go to eBay Motors so I could go get that alternator to put on my car and let it run. And it ran good after I went to eBay Motors and picked up that alternator. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Kits, headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your car, whatever your vehicle needs, eBay Motor has it. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time. Or you can get your money back. At these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die going alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items apply. Exclusions apply, and eligible items are only included. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Coming up next, we got to talk about the rotation. and what's next for the Memphis Grizzlies. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal. I missed you guys on here on Locked On Grizzlies. It was hard, last week. I mean, I had a full slate, so I was doing a lot of work on my own time, but at the same time, it was like, man, I'd love to go on Locked On Grizzlies right now, talk with everyone just about the great things that were happening around the team. I mean, Joe Mullins did a great job covering it with you guys. The Ja Morant game winner, going into Atlanta, winning against Trae Young, the statement win against Tyrese Halliburton led Indiana Pacers. So much has been going on around this Grizzlies team, but now the goal has to be to keep this thing going. You don't want this to just be, a flash in the pan straight where, the Grizzlies win 4 or 5 games in a row, then boom, reality hits them or something like that. You still got to make this team get better. And for example, I like what Taylor Jenkins did in terms of he could have went with the old school, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Vince Williams has started the first 3 games of this win streak. Let's keep Vince Williams in the starting lineup. He could have done that. But Taylor Jenkins said, no, I know what Marcus Smart brings to the table. This guy started for the Boston Celtics recently, during finals runs, during Eastern Conference finals runs, run. Not bringing it. And it made perfect sense for the Grizzlies to put Marcus Smart alongside of Desmond Bane and Ja Morant, especially with Marcus Smart's ability to guard multiple guys at different spots, as we saw in stretches against Brandon Ingram. We saw him in stretches against, CJ McCollum. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies got to figure out how these guys fit together. So here's the simple way of putting it. You got 4 players that you quote unquote can maneuver your lineups around. You got Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr. The idea of the coach should be 2 of those guys should be on the floor at most, if not all times. And we know Jaren Jackson Jr. tends to get in a little bit of foul trouble here and there. So there will be certain situations where whoever he's staggering with is probably going to be the only guy on the floor of those 2, and because Jaren's in foul trouble. But when he's not in foul trouble, you should configure these lineups into the way of, yes, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane are starting. But once you get into the game, you want to have at least 2 of those guys in the game at all time before you get to the closing moments. I think that's the best way to maximize what the Grizzlies have here. So now the question is, who fits well together? Now we saw going back to the very first game when Ja Morant got back. Remember the first Pelicans game, the Grizzlies gave up a 28-2 run in the second quarter of that game. And during that game, Desmond Bane ran with the second unit. It was Ja Morant's first game back. Desmond Bane primarily ran with the second unit. They weren't generating much offense. It was ugly. So in the second game with Ja Morant back against the Indiana Pacers, Taylor Jenkins paired Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. together and put a couple bench pieces around them. And then he paired, Ja Morant with the bench when Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. left the game. So when Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. left, you had Ja Morant in the game starting the second quarter pretty much with guys like John Conchar, Zaire Williams, Santi Aldama, pretty much being the primary guys that he would share the floor with, and Xavier Tillman and Bismack Biyombo too would rotate at the center position. So that's kind of been the way that Taylor Jenkins done it the last couple games. Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. have been playing more together. If you've been following the Grizzlies all season long, I know some of y'all out there didn't come back around until the 26th game of the season, but that's neither here nor there. Everybody's here now. But if you were following the Grizzlies during the rough days in late October all the way through November, then you noticed that Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. They started the games together, they ended the games together, but in the middle parts of the game, they rarely shared the floor much together. Now, with Ja Morant back, just one player alone, with him being back, those 2 have been on the floor more together. The Grizzlies will get good results out of that. And now you got Marcus Smart back. So it was a big question. How do you incorporate him? Because Marcus Smart has, ball handling capabilities. Do you put him on the floor with Jaren Jackson Jr. because you don't want Desmond Bane in such a big playmaking role? and you put Dez and Ja together, or do you put Marcus with Ja Morant? And hey, it's not broke. Don't go trying to fix the Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. pairing with the bench with the reserves. So what the Grizzlies did in this first game was Marcus Smart was paired with Ja Morant. I thought that was interesting because remember, some of us thought, and this was something that I kind of thought as well. But I mean, we see why it's not happening now. This Bane is just taking a jump as a playmaker. That I mean, he's just taking that jump. Talk about 7 assists in this game. But Marcus Smart was kind of brought in to kind of be a de facto backup point guard in certain stretches. You start the game with Ja, both players start, but when Ja goes out, you kind of stagger it, where Marcus Smart will be in the game as the point guard. But as we saw early in the season, there were some mixed results with Marcus Smart at point guard. And if I'm just being honest with you, over the last 3 years, watching the Celtics from afar, you always heard how like there were certain playmaking questions and point guard questions on that team, and Marcus Smart was on that team at all times. So, you just read between the lines. He wasn't really the point guard fit, for what they kind of wanted, I guess, to kind of maximize themselves to win a championship. But he was great, in his combo guard role, playing on the ball, playing off the ball, whatever it may be. And that's kind of the role he's going to have in Memphis. But Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. Ja Morant and Marcus Smart shared the floor together. And in the first half, it was ugly. It wasn't pretty. I mean, Ja Morant, I think when the second quarter started, the Grizzlies were up 24-19. They ended up trailing by as many as 8. They were down 33-31 at the time when Marcus Smart exited. Again, Marcus wasn't scoring. He wasn't rebounding. I think he finished this game with 1 rebound. And I think through 3 quarters, no points, no assists, 1 rebound. It was looking very much like a cardio type game. He did have a couple steals, but it was looking like they might pull up one of those cardio stat sheets on Marcus Smart. But then in the second half, Marcus Smart and Ja Morant started the fourth quarter. Remember, when he got that first made 3-pointer, that was off of Ja Morant's assist. Advanced pass was looking for him. And at that point, those two started to click. We saw the alley-oop, the emphatic alley-oop late in overtime. It led me to believe that lineup pairing can work if everything else around them is paired perfectly. So it's more about those pieces. Santi Aldama, for example, he's going to shoot the ball better going for it. You know how I know this? Well, he didn't make a 3-pointer in this game. This was the first time snaps a 22-game 3-pointer streak for Santi Aldama. So odds are that he's going to probably start another one, and he's going to be back making some 3-pointers. You put him on the floor like that. You got another guy who stretched the floor. You potentially a guy like Luke Kennard, who we'll talk about in our next segment. You got something cooking. And I think right now they can kind of, sow the seeds a little bit with this Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr. Marcus Smart and Ja Morant pairing, because eventually you'll have Santi Aldama and Luke Kennard to go with those guys. 2 guys who are really good shooters. And then you have one of your bigs as well, whether it's Bismack Biyombo, Xavier Tillman Sr. And you got a nice lineup. Then you do the same thing with Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. Put some of those same pieces, around them. We know what the net rating numbers are when Santi Aldama and Jaren Jackson Jr. share the floor together. But basically, the Grizzlies are cooking. They're getting deeper. They're getting more pieces together. We'll see how this continues to unfold. I'm sure Taylor Jenkins will continue to play with it and switch some things up. But right now, it looks like Ja Morant and Marcus Smart will kind of be paired together, as well as Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. I like the idea. Let me know what you guys think as well. If you're tuning in on YouTube in the comments, if you're tuning in anywhere else, you can let me know on X at Damichael C or wherever else you want to let me know. I mean, I'm not hard to find out here, guys. But speaking of not hard to find, it hasn't been hard for me to find Luke Kennard and Derrick Rose in recent days since I've been on the road pretty much everywhere that they've been. So got a couple updates for you guys on a couple key injured Grizzly players. Stay tuned for that coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, got to talk to you about Gametime, because you need to go download the Gametime app today and use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off. Gametime is the place to go where you can get last-minute tickets, flash deals, zones deals. They're easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. And guess what? You can get the views from all seats in the venue. You get the lowest price guaranteed. And you also get an event cancellation protection and a job loss protection in case those unfortunate events happen in the process of you getting your game time tickets. So look, if you having frustrating times buying tickets out here, Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy your tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater events, whatever you listen. And they have great last minute deals. You can go check out the views and you get the best price guarantee because Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. All you got to do right now is simply go download the app today, create an account, and use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off. Again, go download the Gametime app today. Use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about a couple key players for the Grizzlies who are injured, but maybe getting close to a return soon. So stay tuned for that on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thanking you guys for tuning in with us today. Shout out to the everydayers. I can't say it enough. I've seen some of you guys at the games lately, and you say, hey, Damichael, we're enjoying the show. I'm glad you guys enjoying it. Me and Joe, we got some nice things planned as we go into the new year. That we're going to continue to grow the show as well. So really appreciate you guys for sticking with us each and every day as we try to bring the content. And I know a lot of you always reach out to me and say, Michael, we like when you give us some news, around the team. What's the latest with certain players and things like that? And I try to bring that element to the show from time to time. So with that being said, again, two key players that are still out are Luke Kennard and Derrick Rose. Marcus Smart, you just got him back, and all signs point to two more players potentially being rotation players coming back real soon. Let's start with Luke Kennard. That's the closer one. Luke Kennard's at some point this week. I would guess a little bit later this week, he's going to get in 5-on-5 basketball activities. Last week when we were on the road, he was doing half court, just to give you an idea of where he's been tracking throughout his process. He was doing half court work. So when you go from half court, you go to full court, which brings you to 5-on-5. And as many of you who've been following us, usually when players get into the 5-on-5 stage, they're a couple days away, because at that point, it's getting the wind under you, getting up and down a few times, seeing how your body, in his case, his knee bone bruise reacts, and you go from there. So things are looking good for Luke Kennard. If you were asking timetable wise, I think end of this week, potentially early next week, is when we could see Luke Kennard back suiting up. I think the Grizzlies have a back-to-back coming up on the road against the Nuggets and the Clippers that we're going to talk about on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies a little bit. But even before that, after that, the Grizzlies return home and they play the Sacramento Kings. Remember that day. That's a day where we should have a pretty firm idea at that point when Luke Kennard's going to be back, but it's not much longer. The point is that think later in this week, towards the end of the week, or potentially early next week, he'll get into 5-on-5. If everything goes well in those settings, Luke Kennard will be back in the lineup, coming off the bench, being a rotation player for the Grizzlies very soon. Derrick Rose is also close. And that's the good thing. Like, at the end of the day, neither one of these guys are very far out for the Grizzlies. So Derrick Rose, again, when I saw him in Atlanta, he was really breaking a sweat. Same thing we're in Oklahoma. He's doing extra rehab behind the scenes on his hamstring to get back right. He's jogging and moving pretty well from what I've seen. So I think all that is part of the build up for he's completely just, unleashed into the playing field and whatnot. But Derrick Rose is very close. So I think both of those guys should be back potentially by the end of the week or early next week. And once you have them back, then the next question is, what happens? Well, I think Luke Kennard, it's pretty much understood. He'll go right back into the rotation. And again, the Grizzlies have to figure out which lineup pairing he works best with. But in the past, they've liked to have Desmond Bane or Luke Kennard on the floor together. On the floor at most times. And if that's still going to be the case when he gets back, then you're going to see Luke Kennard playing in a lot of stretches with John Morant alongside him and Marcus Smart potentially alongside him as well. So the Luke Kennard news should be encouraging to you, as well as Derrick Rose. We'll see when Derrick Rose gets back. He's someone I could see potentially playing alongside of Desmond Bane. We talked about Desmond Bane having a big playmaking role on his team. Well, you put Derrick Rose back in that lineup, you can get Derrick Rose on the ball a little bit more. And Derrick Rose is also proven to knock down some three-pointers off the ball. So we can see how that works out. But basically, two key pieces. At the end of the day, I think the Grizzlies bench, they need scoring bad. Like Santi Aldama, I give him his credit, and I've been, saying a lot of good things about Santi Aldama this season. And he has been a pretty consistent shooter. I know if you look at the stats from this one game, 9 minutes, no points, 0 of 2 on three-pointers. I know. But for the season, Santi Aldama has been very good and consistent as a shooter off the bench. But outside of him, let's go this game in particular. You got David Roddy, 8 points, Zaire Williams, 2 points in 12 minutes, and the other guys just aren't scorers like that. Vince Williams, I thought, was really good. 6 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists in 27 minutes. Xavier Tillman Sr., 2 points, 8 rebounds, 5 blocks, and a steal in this game against the Pelicans. Both of those guys were very good, but the scoring thing, not really their thing at this point of their careers, at least. So with that being said, Luke Kennard, scoring is his thing. Derrick Rose has proven, in stretches, it's been inconsistent, but he's proven the ability to go off the dribble, get to his spots, and have the ability to be a shot-creating scorer for the Grizzlies. So with that being said, you got two options who could at least add a dynamic ability to what the Grizzlies can be, as an offense. The defense is starting to click. Now, I think if you talk about the Grizzlies taking that next step, that offensive efficiency. The Pelicans were one of the best defenses in the NBA. We saw the Grizzlies just churning out 50% shooting games when John Morant got back 3 in a row, leading up into this game where they shot 43% from the field. So, again, two guys really, really close. There's going to be more help on the way for the Grizzlies. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and I think you should go check it out. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league out there. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and make sure you subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Make sure you go check that out. You got to go check that out because guess what? You can check it out any time of the day because it's 24/7 streaming on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to that. And thank you for continuing to subscribe and watch Locked On Grizzlies with us. Me and Joe Mullinax will be back with you soon. Got a lot to talk about on tomorrow's show. Make sure you go check out my story from this morning on Derrick Rose as well. I talked to him while we were in Houston about, just life. And I think it's a great read just about how he and his family are getting adjusted in Memphis. So make sure you go check that out as well. And make sure you continue to check out our coverage here at Locked On Grizzlies because guess what? It doesn't get any easier from here. You got games against the Nuggets and the Clippers coming up, two of the better teams in the Western Conference. Well, guess what? There aren't too many better places you can come that'll have you covered than Locked On Grizzlies. But once again, thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked